There comes a moment in life that arrives quietly. No trumpet announces it. No crowd celebrates it. No milestone marks its arrival. Yet when it comes, everything begins to change. You wake up one morning and realize something that once consumed so much of your energy no longer deserves a place in your thoughts. The need to explain yourself. The need to justify every decision. The need to defend every choice. The need to convince others that your path makes sense. For most of life, many people carry this burden without even noticing it. They explain why they left a job, why they stayed in a relationship, why they ended one, why they moved, why they changed, why they believe what they believe, why they live the way they live. And beneath every explanation lies a hidden desire. The desire to be understood, the desire to be accepted, the desire to avoid judgment. It is a deeply human desire, perhaps one of the most human desires of all. Yet there is a strange paradox buried within it. The more desperately you seek understanding from everyone, the less at peace you become. Because no matter how carefully you explain yourself, someone will misunderstand. No matter how clearly you speak, someone will misinterpret. No matter how sincere your intentions, someone will question them. And if your peace depends upon universal understanding, peace will forever remain beyond your reach. Marcus Aurelius understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. As Emperor of Rome, he lived beneath the gaze of millions. Every decision invited criticism. Every action attracted opinions. Every choice generated approval from some and resentment from others. Yet within his private reflections, he repeatedly returned to the same truth. You do not control what others think. You do not control how others interpret your actions. You do not control the stories they tell themselves about you. You control only one thing: the character with which you act. This realization becomes increasingly powerful with age, especially after 60, because by then, life has already shown you something important. People rarely see the entire story. They see fragments, pieces, moments, appearances, but never the complete picture. They did not carry your fears. They did not endure your sleepless nights. They did not sit beside your disappointments. They did not fight your private battles. And yet many will feel qualified to judge your decisions. This is the strange theater of human life. People often form opinions using only a fraction of the evidence, and then speak with complete certainty. The younger version of you may have fought these judgments, attempted to correct them, attempted to explain, attempted to defend, attempted to win approval. But age begins revealing the futility of this struggle, not because people become cynical, because they become realistic. You begin understanding that many misunderstandings cannot be solved, only accepted. Many judgments cannot be corrected, only ignored. Many opinions cannot be changed, only released. And in that release, a profound freedom begins. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack for decades. You become so accustomed to its weight that you no longer notice it. Then one day you remove it. Suddenly, the world feels lighter. The road feels easier. Your body feels free. This is what happens when you stop explaining yourself to everyone. You discover how much energy was being wasted, how much emotional strength was being consumed, how much peace was being sacrificed, not because explanations are always wrong, but because endless explanations often reveal misplaced priorities. When you know who you are, not every opinion deserves a response. When your conscience is clear, not every accusation requires a defense. When your values are intact, not every criticism requires engagement. This is not arrogance. It is maturity. The mountain does not explain its height. The ocean does not justify its depth. The stars do not argue for their existence. They simply are. And there is wisdom in that. A quiet confidence, a natural dignity, a freedom from constant self-defense. Much of suffering comes from trying to manage perceptions, trying to control narratives, trying to ensure everyone understands your intentions. Yet intentions live within you. Others only see outcomes, and sometimes even those outcomes are distorted through their own fears, biases, expectations, and experiences. How can you possibly control that? You cannot, nor were you meant to. The Stoics understood that peace begins where control ends, not because they were passive, because they were realistic. They invested energy where energy could actually create change. Their actions, their choices, their character, their discipline, not the endless opinions of strangers, not the shifting judgments of society, not the approval of people who barely understood them. After 60, this lesson becomes especially valuable because time itself becomes precious. Every year feels more meaningful. Every morning becomes more significant. Every conversation carries greater weight. And once you recognize the finite nature of life, something remarkable happens. You become less willing to waste your remaining years seeking permission to be yourself. You stop auditioning for acceptance. You stop performing for approval. You stop apologizing for becoming who life has shaped you into. Instead, you begin living, not recklessly, not selfishly, but honestly. For perhaps the greatest tragedy is not being misunderstood by others. The greatest tragedy is misunderstanding yourself, because you spent too many years trying to satisfy everyone else. And somewhere deep inside, many people know this. They know there are dreams they abandoned because others disapproved, truths they remained silent about because others might judge, paths they refused to take because someone questioned their direction. The cost of this is immense, because every time you betray your inner truth to satisfy external expectations, a small part of your freedom disappears. And freedom, once lost repeatedly, becomes difficult to recognize. Yet age offers a gift, a second chance, a chance to return to yourself, a chance to stop carrying unnecessary burdens, a chance to stop fighting battles that never needed to be fought, a chance to stop explaining your existence to people who have already decided what they wish to believe, and perhaps most importantly, a chance to finally understand that your life was never meant to be a courtroom. You were never placed here to spend decades defending yourself. You were placed here to live. To live. Such a simple phrase. Yet so many people reach the later chapters of their lives having spent decades doing everything except that. They survived. They worked. They sacrificed. They accommodated. They adapted themselves to their expectations of others so many times that eventually they forgot where those expectations ended and where their own voice began. This is one of the quiet dangers of aging without reflection. Not growing older while remaining trapped inside roles that no longer belong to you. The role of the people pleaser, the role of the peacemaker, the role of the one who constantly explains, justifies, reassures, and seeks validation. At first, these habits appear harmless, even noble. You tell yourself you are being considerate. You tell yourself you are avoiding conflict. You tell yourself you are helping others understand. But over time, something begins to happen. The habit becomes a dependency, and the dependency becomes a prison. You begin needing approval before making decisions, needing agreement before feeling confident, needing reassurance before trusting yourself. Without realizing it, you hand the steering wheel of your life to people who are not responsible for its destination. Marcus Aurelius warned himself constantly about this tendency, not because he was immune to it, because he understood how powerful it was. Human beings naturally seek belonging. We want connection. We want acceptance. We want community. These desires are not weaknesses. They are part of our nature. But problems arise when belonging becomes more important than truth, when acceptance becomes more important than integrity, when being liked becomes more important than being authentic. At that moment, peace begins slipping away. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. You start saying yes when your heart says no. You start remaining silent when wisdom says speak. You start speaking when wisdom says remain silent. Your actions become disconnected from your inner compass, and every step taken away from that compass creates tension, a subtle discomfort, a feeling that something is not quite right. Many people spend years trying to solve this discomfort without realizing its source. They blame circumstances, they blame age, they blame other people. Yet often the true source is much simpler. They have drifted too far from themselves. After 60, this truth becomes difficult to ignore. The mirror changes, the body changes, the world changes, friends disappear, parents are gone, children become adults, entire decades pass like pages turning in a book, and suddenly you realize something startling. Most of the people whose opinions once held enormous power over your life are no longer present. Some have moved away. Some have changed. Some have forgot the very things that once kept you awake at night. Some are no longer alive. Yet the burden of seeking their approval remained, carried year after year, long after it served any purpose. This realization can feel painful, but it can also feel liberating, because it reveals how much unnecessary weight has been carried. Imagine standing in a room filled with voices, each voice offering advice, criticism, expectations, warnings, judgments, predictions. For years you try listening to all of them. You attempt to satisfy each one, to avoid disappointing anyone, to earn everyone's approval. The result is chaos, not because the voices are malicious, because there are too many of them. And eventually, their noise becomes louder than your own wisdom. The Stoics understood that clarity requires silence, not merely external silence, internal silence, the ability to hear your own conscience beneath the noise of public opinion, the ability to distinguish what is yours from what belongs to others, their expectations, their fears, their preferences, their projections, their interpretations. None of these are truly yours. Yet many people spend entire lifetimes carrying them. After 60, a different possibility emerges. You can set them down. Not angrily, not dramatically, simply and quietly, like a traveler realizing that half the contents of his suitcase are unnecessary. You stop carrying what was never yours, and with every burden released, your spirit becomes lighter. You no longer feel compelled to explain why you enjoy solitude. You no longer feel compelled to justify why certain relationships ended. You no longer feel compelled to defend every choice. You understand something profound. Those who genuinely care about you do not require endless explanations, and those determined to misunderstand you will never be satisfied by them. This is not pessimism. It is observation. Life has already shown you enough examples. You have explained yourself perfectly and still been misunderstood. You have spoken honestly and still been judged. You have acted with integrity and still been criticized. Not because you failed, because human beings see through the lens of their own experiences. Every person interprets reality differently. And once you accept this, an extraordinary freedom appears. You stop trying to manage every perception. You stop trying to control every narrative. You stop trying to occupy every mind. Instead, you focus on the only place where real influence exists: your own character, your own actions, your own conscience. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything, because now your peace no longer depends upon agreement. It depends upon alignment. Alignment between what you believe and how you live. Alignment between your values and your choices. alignment between your inner world and your outer actions. When these things align, a remarkable calm emerges, not because life becomes easier, because you stop fighting unnecessary battles. And many of the battles that exhaust people in later life are unnecessary. The battle to be understood by everyone. The battle to be appreciated by everyone. The battle to be approved of by everyone. These battles cannot be won, not because you lack skill, because the goal itself is impossible. Human beings are too different, too complex, too shaped by their own stories. The wise person eventually recognizes this and chooses a different path. Not the path of bitterness, not the path of isolation, the path of acceptance. Acceptance that misunderstanding is part of life. Acceptance that judgment is part of life. Acceptance that approval is inconsistent and temporary. Acceptance that peace must come from somewhere deeper, somewhere that cannot be given by others and cannot be taken away by them. That place exists within you, and the older you become, the more important it becomes to protect it. Protect it, not because it is fragile, because it is valuable. A priceless thing does not require fear to justify protection. It requires understanding. A person who has spent 60 years or more walking through this world has already witnessed enough evidence to know how easily peace can be disturbed. One careless word, one unnecessary argument, one person's bitterness spilling into another person's day, one old wound reopened by someone who has no idea it exists. Human beings often move through life carrying invisible burdens. The older you become, the easier it is to see them. You begin noticing that many people are not reacting to you at all. They are reacting to their own pain, their own disappointments, their own fears, their own unresolved conflicts. The criticism they direct toward you may have very little to do with you. The judgment they place upon your choices may reveal more about their limitations than your decisions. The anger they express may be rooted in battles they have never learned to face. This realization changes the way you see people. You become less offended, less defensive, less eager to prove yourself, not because you no longer care, because you understand. And understanding is often the birthplace of compassion. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that every person acts according to what they believe to be true, even when they are mistaken, even when they are unfair, even when they are difficult. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it does make resentment less necessary. The older you get, the more clearly you recognize how exhausting resentment truly is. It asks you to carry the weight of another person's actions long after they have moved on. It demands your attention, your energy, your thoughts, and in exchange, it offers nothing. No peace, no healing, no freedom, only continued attachment to something that has already happened. Wisdom sees this trade and quietly declines it, not because forgetting is easy, not because forgiveness always comes naturally, but because inner freedom matters more. There is a profound difference between remembering a lesson and continuing to carry a wound. One creates wisdom, the other creates suffering. And perhaps nowhere is this lesson more important than in the later chapters of life, because eventually you realize that your remaining years deserve better than endless emotional debt. They deserve presence. They deserve clarity. They deserve gratitude. Think of how many sunrises remain unseen because people are staring backward. Think of how many peaceful mornings are surrendered to old arguments. How many beautiful moments are sacrificed to memories that cannot be changed. Life does not ask you to erase the past. Life asks you not to live there. The past is a teacher, not a home. Yet many people build entire identities around old injuries. They become caretakers of ancient grievances, guardians of stories that continue hurting them long after everyone else has forgot. The Stoics would have viewed this as a form of self-imposed captivity, a prison whose door remains open while the prisoner refuses to leave. After 60, one of the greatest acts of courage is deciding to walk out, not because the pain was imaginary, because your future deserves your attention more than your past deserves your imprisonment. And once this shift begins, another transformation quietly follows. You stop needing everyone to understand your journey. You stop feeling obligated to provide lengthy explanations for every decision. You stop seeking unanimous approval before moving forward, because you finally recognize something that should have been obvious all along. The people who genuinely care about you will often seek understanding. The people who do not care rarely will. No amount of explanation can force openness into a closed mind. No amount of evidence can create willingness where willingness does not exist. And so you begin conserving your energy, not hoarding it, stewarding it, like a wise gardener who understands that water must be directed toward living roots rather than barren ground. This is not withdrawal from life. It is participation with greater awareness. You become more selective with conversations, more intentional with your time, more careful with your emotional investments, not because your world is shrinking, because your vision is improving. You begin recognizing that life was never meant to be spent convincing everyone of your worth. Worth does not emerge from agreement. Worth exists independent of it. The oak tree remains magnificent whether admired or ignored. The mountain remains majestic whether praised or criticized. The ocean does not become less vast because someone fails to appreciate its depth. Nature offers this lesson constantly. Everything authentic exists according to its nature, not according to public opinion. And perhaps this is the deepest invitation hidden within aging, to return to your own nature, to stop performing, to stop pretending, to stop negotiating your identity in exchange for acceptance, to become simple again, not simplistic, simple, the simplicity of knowing what matters, the simplicity of honoring your values, the simplicity of speaking honestly, the simplicity of walking away when necessary, the simplicity of being at peace with who you have become. This kind of peace cannot be purchased. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be granted by society. It grows slowly, like roots deepening beneath the surface, invisible to most people, yet strong enough to withstand storms. And storms will come. They always do. Loss will arrive. Change will arrive. Disappointment will arrive. Time itself guarantees this. But there is a difference between being shaken and being uprooted. A tree with deep roots may bend in the wind. It does not collapse. A person grounded in wisdom may feel sorrow, may feel grief, may feel uncertainty. Yet beneath those emotions remains something steady, a quiet center, a place untouched by public opinion, untouched by misunderstanding, untouched by the endless need to explain. The older you become, the more valuable that center becomes, because eventually you understand that the world will always have opinions. People will always interpret, judge, speculate, approve, disapprove, praise, criticize. This has been true for every generation, every century, every human life. What changes is whether you allow those voices to govern the peace within you. And that choice remains yours, always yours, no matter your age, no matter your circumstances, no matter what others believe about you. For the deepest freedom available to any human being is not freedom from criticism. It is freedom from needing criticism to disappear before you can finally live. To finally live. There is a quiet sadness that settles over many lives, not because people lacked opportunity, but because they waited too long for permission. Permission to speak honestly. Permission to change. Permission to leave. Permission to begin again. Permission to become who they truly were. Years pass this way, sometimes decades. A person carries dreams that remain unopened, words that remain unspoken, truths that remain hidden beneath layers of caution and expectation. And all the while, life continues moving forward. The seasons change without hesitation. The leaves fall without apology. The rivers continue flowing toward the sea without seeking approval from the stones along their banks. Nature understands something that human beings often forget. Life is movement. Life is change. Life is becoming. Yet many people spend enormous amounts of energy resisting this reality. They cling to outdated versions of themselves, old identities, old roles, old expectations, old obligations that no longer reflect who they have become. After 60, the cost of carrying these things becomes impossible to ignore. Not because strength disappears, because clarity increases. You begin seeing that every unnecessary burden occupies space that could be used for something far more valuable. Presence, gratitude, peace, wisdom. There comes a point when you stop asking, "What will people think?" and begin asking a far more important question. What kind of life remains possible if I stop living for their opinions? The answer can be startling, because many of the walls that confined you were never truly walls. They were assumptions, fears, expectations, invisible boundaries built from imagined consequences. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on how much suffering is created not by reality itself, but by the stories we tell about reality. A criticism becomes a catastrophe. A disagreement becomes rejection. A misunderstanding becomes proof that we are unworthy. Yet often these conclusions exist nowhere except within the mind. The event happens, then interpretation follows, and it is interpretation that creates much of the pain. This is why self-mastery begins not with controlling the world, but with understanding the mind. The mind is a remarkable servant, but a dangerous master. Left unchecked, it creates endless concerns, endless comparisons, endless hypothetical futures, endless rehearsals of conversations that may never happen. It becomes occupied with defending itself against shadows, and in doing so, it misses the life unfolding directly in front of it. The older you become, the more precious attention becomes, not because there is less life available, because you finally understand its value. You recognize that attention is life. Whatever receives your attention receives your existence. If resentment receives it, resentment grows. If fear receives it, fear grows. If gratitude receives it, gratitude grows. If wisdom receives it, wisdom grows. Every day becomes an act of cultivation, an opportunity to decide what deserves residence within your mind. This is why wise people become increasingly protective of their inner world, not because they fear reality, because they understand influence. They know that not every conversation deserves entry, not every argument deserves participation, not every opinion deserves consideration. The modern world often treats accessibility as virtue, as though being available to everyone at all times is somehow noble. But wisdom recognizes limits. Even the strongest river has banks. Even the vast ocean has shores. Everything healthy possesses boundaries, including the human spirit. Without boundaries, peace is constantly invaded. Without boundaries, energy is endlessly depleted. Without boundaries, life becomes a reaction rather than a deliberate expression of values. And perhaps one of the most important boundaries a person can develop is the boundary between their own conscience and the expectations of others. Because expectations never end. Satisfy one and another appears. Meet one standard and a new standard emerges. Seek universal approval, and the pursuit becomes endless. A horizon that moves farther away each time you approach it. The Stoics understood this. They understood that peace cannot be built upon conditions that remain outside your control. If your happiness depends on praise, criticism will destroy it. If your confidence depends on agreement, disagreement will weaken it. If your identity depends on external validation, every rejection becomes a threat. But if your peace is rooted in character, if your confidence is rooted in integrity, if your identity is rooted in truth, then the world loses much of its power to disturb you. This does not mean you become indifferent. It means you become anchored. The ship still encounters storms, but it no longer drifts wherever the waves decide. Age offers a unique opportunity to develop this anchor. Not automatically. Many grow older without growing wiser. Wisdom requires reflection. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to examine your own life with courage, to ask difficult questions, to acknowledge uncomfortable truths, to release beliefs that no longer serve you. This work is not easy, yet it is among the most rewarding endeavors a human being can undertake, because every layer of illusion removed reveals something deeper, something more authentic, something closer to who you truly are, beneath all the roles and expectations. And what many discover is surprisingly simple. Beneath the need for approval lies a desire for peace. Beneath the need to impress lies a desire to be accepted. Beneath the need to explain lies a desire to be understood. These desires are not wrong. They are profoundly human. But wisdom gradually teaches that peace cannot depend upon receiving them from everyone. Sometimes understanding will come. Sometimes it will not. Sometimes acceptance will arrive. Sometimes it will not. Sometimes people will see your heart clearly. Sometimes they will misunderstand completely. Yet your life continues. Your purpose continues. Your opportunity to live honorably continues. And that is where freedom begins. Not when the world finally understands you. Not when criticism disappears. Not when everyone agrees. But when you realize that none of those things were ever prerequisites for a meaningful life. A meaningful life was available all along, waiting patiently beneath the noise, waiting beneath the explanations, waiting beneath the endless effort to manage how others perceive you, waiting for the moment you finally decide to place your attention where it has always belonged, within the life that is yours to live, within the life that is yours to live, not the life others imagined for you, not the life shaped by old expectations, not the life dictated by fear, the life that remains when all unnecessary noise is removed. There is something profoundly liberating about reaching an age where appearances begin losing their authority. For much of life, people are taught to build an image, a reputation, a version of themselves that can be displayed to the world. They learn how to appear successful, how to appear confident, how to appear accomplished, how to appear happy. And often, they become so skilled at maintaining the image that they lose contact with the person behind it. This creates a quiet exhaustion, an exhaustion many cannot name, because maintaining appearances requires constant effort, constant monitoring, constant adjustment. You must remember who people think you are. You must protect the image. You must defend it when challenged. You must explain it when misunderstood. And over time, the performance becomes heavier than the truth. After 60, many people begin feeling this weight, not because they are weak, because they have carried it long enough to recognize it. They begin noticing how much energy has been spent preserving perceptions, how many hours were lost worrying about opinions, how many decisions were influenced by the fear of judgment. And gradually, another possibility emerges, the possibility of simplicity. Not the simplicity of having fewer responsibilities, the simplicity of becoming more genuine, the simplicity of no longer needing to perform, the simplicity of allowing your life to reflect your values rather than your image. This kind of simplicity creates an unusual strength. Because a person who no longer depends upon appearances becomes difficult to manipulate. Criticism loses much of its power. Praise loses much of its power. Approval loses much of its power. Disapproval loses much of its power. Not because these things cease to matter entirely, because they no longer define reality. Reality becomes something deeper. Reality becomes character. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea repeatedly. Again and again, he reminded himself that what truly matters is not what people say about you. It is what you become, not the reputation others create, the character you cultivate. This distinction is life-changing, because reputation belongs partly to other people. Character belongs entirely to you. Reputation can be distorted. Character cannot. Reputation can rise and fall overnight. Character develops slowly through choices repeated over years. Reputation depends upon observation. Character depends upon action. And when you begin valuing character more than reputation, a remarkable freedom appears. You stop feeling compelled to defend yourself against every misunderstanding. You stop treating criticism as an emergency. You stop believing that every false narrative requires correction. You understand that truth possesses a patience that deception lacks. A person can spend years trying to convince others of who they are, or they can simply become that person and allow time to reveal it. The second path is quieter, but it is infinitely more powerful. Consider the oak tree. It does not announce its strength. It does not argue for its worth. It does not explain why its roots run deep. Year after year, it simply grows. Storm after storm, it remains standing. Its existence becomes the evidence. Its endurance becomes the proof. Wisdom works in much the same way. The wisest people often explain themselves the least, not because they are secretive, because they understand that a life lived consistently communicates more than endless words ever could. There is a calm confidence that develops when you no longer feel responsible for managing every opinion. A confidence that does not need to dominate conversations, does not need to win arguments, does not need to prove superiority. It simply rests within itself, secure, steady, unafraid. And perhaps this is one of the greatest gifts of aging, the opportunity to exchange performance for authenticity, to exchange explanation for presence, to exchange approval, seeking for self-respect. Many people spend their early years trying to become someone. Their later years offer the chance to simply be someone, to stop chasing identities, to stop collecting validation, to stop measuring worth through the eyes of others, and instead to stand quietly within their own truth. This truth may not impress everyone. It may not attract universal admiration. It may even invite criticism. But it possesses something far more valuable. Peace. The kind of peace that does not depend upon circumstances. The kind of peace that remains even when misunderstood, even when judged, even when alone. Because it is rooted in something deeper than public opinion. It is rooted in self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is one of the rarest forms of wealth. Many people know countless facts about the world while remaining strangers to themselves. They know what society expects. They know what others want. They know how they are perceived. Yet they have never truly examined their own hearts, never sat quietly with their own thoughts, never questioned the assumptions guiding their lives, never asked what they genuinely value beyond what they have been taught to value. Age creates opportunities for these questions, and if approached honestly, the answers can transform everything. You begin discovering that much of what once seemed essential was never essential at all. The endless approval, the constant explanations, the need to be right, the need to be understood by everyone, the need to control how your story is told. These things begin falling away, not through force, through insight, like leaves released naturally by a tree when their season has ended. And beneath them remains something simpler, something quieter, something more enduring. A person who knows who they are, a person who trusts their conscience, a person who can walk their path without requiring applause, a person who understands that dignity is not granted by the crowd. It is cultivated within. Such a person moves differently through the world. They listen more carefully, speak more deliberately, choose their battles wisely, protect their peace without apology, and perhaps most importantly, they stop treating every misunderstanding as a threat, because they finally understand a truth that only wisdom can fully reveal. Not everyone needs to understand your journey for your journey to be meaningful. Not everyone needs to approve of your choices for those choices to be right. Not everyone needs to agree with your path for that path to lead exactly where it was meant to go. And once this realization settles into the soul, a profound stillness begins to emerge. A stillness that cannot be manufactured. A stillness that comes only from finally laying down burdens that were never yours to carry. A burden that was never yours to carry. How much of your life has been spent carrying such burdens? How many nights were surrendered to worrying about what someone else might think? How many decisions were delayed because another person's approval had not yet arrived? How many opportunities passed by because you feared misunderstanding more than regret? These questions are not meant to create guilt. They are meant to create awareness, because awareness is where freedom begins. The truth is that most people will never fully know your story. Even those closest to you, even those who love you. They see chapters. You lived the entire book. They witnessed moments. You carried the years. They observed actions. You experienced intentions. This is why complete understanding is so rare, and why demanding it from others creates endless disappointment. The older you become, the more you appreciate this reality, not as a source of sadness, as a source of peace. You stop expecting others to see every hidden struggle, every sacrifice, every fear, every private victory. And because you stop expecting it, you stop suffering when it doesn't happen. You become gentler with people, not because they have changed, because your expectations have. You realize that every person is limited, limited by their experiences, limited by their perspective, limited by their understanding, just as you are. And suddenly, the need to constantly explain begins dissolving, like morning mist disappearing beneath the sunlight, not through force, through clarity. There is an extraordinary calm that arrives when you no longer feel obligated to defend every aspect of your life. A calm that cannot be purchased. A calm that emerges from acceptance. Acceptance that some people will understand, some will not. Some will support you. Some will criticize you. Some will admire your choices. Some will question them. And none of this changes who you are. A flower does not stop blooming because someone dislikes its color. The moon does not alter its course because someone fails to appreciate its light. Nature remains faithful to itself. And perhaps this is one of the deepest lessons Marcus Aurelius sought to teach. Live according to your nature, not according to applause, not according to criticism, not according to fashion, not according to public opinion. According to what is true, according to what is honorable, according to what your conscience knows is right. When you live this way, life becomes simpler, not easier, simpler. You stop wasting energy maintaining masks. You stop rehearsing explanations. You stop creating imaginary arguments in your mind. You stop fighting battles that exist only in the realm of perception. And all that reclaimed energy becomes available for something far more meaningful. Living, truly living, being present for the people who matter. Watching a sunrise without mentally defending yourself against someone else's opinion. Sharing a conversation without wondering how you are being perceived. Walking through the world without carrying the exhausting responsibility of managing everyone's interpretation of your life. This is freedom, not the freedom to control circumstances, the freedom to remain at peace despite them, the freedom to let others have their opinions while you continue your path, the freedom to be misunderstood without becoming disturbed, the freedom to know that your worth was never determined by agreement. As the years pass, another realization often emerges. The people whose approval once seemed essential were never the authors of your life. You were. They may have influenced certain chapters, appeared in certain scenes, offered advice, criticism, encouragement, or resistance, but they were never holding the pen. You were. And one day, whether at 70, 80, or 90, every person reaches a moment of reflection, a moment when the noise grows distant, when the race slows, when the opinions that once felt enormous become strangely small. And in that moment, very few people wish they had spent more time explaining themselves. Very few wish they had worried more about judgment. Very few wish they had sacrificed more authenticity in exchange for approval. Instead, they wish they had trusted themselves sooner, spoken honestly sooner, lived courageously sooner, protected their peace sooner, recognized sooner that life was never asking them to convince everyone. Life was asking them to be themselves, fully, courageously, without apology, not arrogantly, not selfishly, but truthfully, because truth has a quiet strength. It does not need constant defense. It does not need endless explanation. It simply stands like a mountain, like an ancient tree, like the steady rhythm of the sea. And perhaps that is where wisdom ultimately leads, not toward louder voices, toward quieter certainty, not toward greater control of others, toward greater mastery of oneself, not toward universal approval, toward inner freedom. After 60, the world may continue offering opinions. Let it. People may continue misunderstanding. Let them. Some may question your choices. Let them. Some may never see the full picture. Let them. Your task is not to manage every mind. Your task is to guard your own. Your task is not to explain every decision. Your task is to make decisions worthy of your conscience. Your task is not to earn acceptance from everyone. Your task is to remain faithful to what is good, true, and honorable. And when you finally understand this, something beautiful happens. The weight begins to fall away. The tension begins to dissolve. The endless need to justify your existence disappears. You walk a little lighter, breathe a little deeper, smile a little easier, because at last you recognize a truth that was always waiting for you. You do not need everyone to understand your life for your life to have meaning. You do not need everyone to approve of your path for your path to be right. You do not need everyone to agree with you for your soul to be at peace. After 60, stop explaining yourself to people. The years ahead are too precious. Your energy is too valuable. Your peace is too sacred. Live honestly. Walk calmly. Speak truthfully. And let your life, not your explanations, tell the story of who you are.